The other prisoners ran as soon as the chains released. They scattered in every direction like frightened animals, crashing through the undergrowth without any thought or plan. Some ran alone. Some formed small groups. All of them moved as fast as they could, desperate to put distance between themselves and the hunters. Ethan did not run. He stood at the edge of the clearing and watched the jungle. He studied the trees, looking for fruit or nuts. He examined the soil, checking for moisture and animal tracks. He listened to the sounds around him, identifying birds and insects and the distant call of something larger. The silvery girl, Kira, had not run either. She stood a few feet away, frozen with fear, watching Ethan with confusion. "What are you doing?" she asked. "We need to run. They will come soon." "Running is what prey does," Ethan said quietly. "Prey runs without thinking. Prey exhausts itself. Prey makes noise and leaves tracks and dies tired." He knelt down and touched the ground. The soil was damp. There was water nearby. "But we are prey," Kira said. "We have no weapons, no food, no shelter. What else can we do except run?" Ethan stood up and looked at her. She was trembling, her lavender skin pale with terror. She was young and scared, and she had probably never faced anything like this in her life. He remembered feeling the same way once, a long time ago. "You can run if you want," he said. "But if you stay with me, I need you to do exactly what I tell you. No questions, no arguments. Can you do that?" Kira hesitated. She looked at the jungle where the others had disappeared. She looked back at Ethan. Something in his eyes must have convinced her because she nodded slowly. "Good. Follow me." He moved into the jungle, but not quickly. He walked at a steady pace, placing his feet carefully to avoid making noise. He stayed low, using the vegetation as cover. Every few minutes, he stopped to listen and observed Kira followed close behind, trying to copy his movements. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "Higher ground. We need to see the terrain before we can use it." They walked for almost an hour, climbing slowly up a ridge that rose above the jungle canopy. By the time they reached the top, Ethan had already identified 3 edible plants, 2 sources of fresh water, and signs of at least 4 different animal species. From the ridge, they could see for miles. The jungle spread out below them in every direction. To the north, Ethan spotted a river. To the east, there were caves in a limestone cliff face. To the south, he could see the clearing where they had been released and the transport ship that was already lifting off. "The hunt would begin soon. We need shelter," Ethan said. "Those caves to the east, that is where we will make our base." "Base?" Kira looked at him like he was speaking a different language. "We are not soldiers. We are slaves running for our lives." "No," Ethan corrected her. "They think we are slaves. They think we are running. That is their mistake." He started moving toward the caves. The cave system was better than Ethan had hoped. The main entrance was narrow, easy to defend. Inside, the caves branched off into multiple tunnels, providing escape routes if needed. There was a small underground stream for water. Best of all, the limestone walls were filled with flint deposits. Flint meant fire. Flint meant tools. Flint meant weapons. Ethan spent the rest of the day working. He gathered dry wood and leaves for fire. He found long, straight branches for spears. He collected vines that could be woven into rope. He identified plants that were poisonous and others that had medicinal properties. Kira watched him with growing amazement. "How do you know all of this?" she asked. "Humans have been surviving in the wilderness for hundreds of thousands of years," Ethan explained as he worked. "We had no claws, no fangs, no armor. We survived because we learned. We watched, we adapted. Every environment, every danger, every predator, we found a way to overcome it." He struck 2 pieces of flint together and smiled as sparks flew. Your species database says humans are a minimal threat because we have no natural weapons. But that misses the point entirely. We do not need natural weapons. We make our own. By nightfall, Ethan had crafted 3 spears with fire-hardened tips. He had built a small smokeless fire in the back of the cave where the light could not be seen from outside. He had created a simple alarm system using vines and loose rocks at the cave entrance. Kira helped where she could, and Ethan taught her as they worked. How to move quietly, how to find water, how to read tracks. She was a fast learner. The hunters have technology, she said, as they ate some bitter roots Ethan had found. Plasma weapons. Tracking devices. How can sticks and rocks fight against that? Technology is a tool, Ethan said. Tools can be taken. Tools can be broken. Tools can be turned against their owners. He picked up one of his spears and tested its weight. And technology makes people lazy. The Grothians have been the hunters for so long, they have forgotten what it feels like to be hunted. They have forgotten how to be afraid. He looked at the cave entrance, where darkness was falling over the jungle. I am going to remind them. That night, Ethan slept in shifts, always keeping one ear open for sounds of approach. The jungle was alive with noise, but none of it was Grothian. They were coming, though. He knew that. The 1-hour head start was long gone, and somewhere, out there in the darkness, Varndok and his hunters were tracking their prey. Ethan thought about the other prisoners. Most of them were probably already dead, or soon would be. They had run blindly into unfamiliar territory with no plan and no skills. Easy targets, but not all of them would die quickly. Some would hide. Some would get lucky. And when those survivors realized that running was not working, they would look for another option. Ethan intended to give them one in the morning. He left Kira hidden in the caves with instructions to stay silent and still. Then he went back into the jungle alone. He moved like a ghost through the undergrowth, leaving no tracks, making no sound. He found the trail of one of the hunting parties and followed it from a distance. He watched the Grothians move through. The jungle, loud and confident, their tracking devices beeping as they closed in on some poor, frightened creature. He counted 6 hunters plus Varndok himself. They had plasma rifles and shock nets and hunting beasts called razor fangs that looked like a cross between a wolf and a crocodile. They laughed as they walked, treating this like a game, because to them, it was a game. It had always been a game. Ethan watched from the shadows as they cornered their first victim, the gray-skinned alien who had spoken to Ethan in the cell. Gray tried to fight, swinging a branch he had found somewhere. The hunters shot him down without even slowing their pace. They left his body where it fell and moved on to find the next one. Ethan stayed hidden until they were gone. Then he approached the body. Gray was dead, but his death had taught Ethan something valuable. He had seen how the hunters moved, how they communicated, how they operated. He had seen their weaknesses. I am sorry, Ethan said quietly to the body, but I will make them pay for this. He returned to the caves as the sun began to set. Kira was waiting, scared but unharmed. What did you find? She asked. Ethan began sharpening a new piece of flint into a blade. I found their patterns. I found their weaknesses. Tomorrow we stop running. He looked up at her with cold determination in his eyes. Tomorrow we start hunting. The holding cell smelled like rust and fear. Ethan Cole sat in the corner with his back against the cold metal wall, watching the other prisoners through half-closed eyes. They came from a dozen different worlds. Some had scales. Some had fur. A few had skin that changed color with their emotions. All of them were terrified. Ethan was terrified too, but he had learned long ago to hide it. 3 weeks earlier, he had been sleeping in his cabin aboard the colony transport ship Meridian. He was a survival instructor heading to the new settlement on Kepler 442b, where the colonists would need someone to teach them how to live off the land. Then the Vexery slavers came. They cut through the ship's hull like it was paper. They killed anyone who fought back and took everyone else. Now, Ethan sat in a cage on a station called Korath, waiting to be sold. The alien next to him was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. His name was something Ethan could not pronounce, so he just thought of him as Gray. The alien had been staring at Ethan for hours with obvious confusion. "You are human, yes?" Gray finally asked. Ethan nodded. "I have heard of your species. You are new to the galaxy. Soft bodies. No claws, no venom, no natural weapons at all." Gray shook his head slowly. "I am sorry for you, human. Whatever happens next, you will not survive it." Ethan said nothing. He just kept watching the guards. There were 2 of them at the main door. They changed shifts every 6 hours. They carried plasma rifles, but kept them holstered most of the time. They were bored. Bored guards made mistakes. The cell had 43 prisoners. The walls were solid metal, except for the energy barrier at the front. There was a small drain in the floor for waste. The ceiling had ventilation grates, but they were too small for most species to fit through. Most species. Ethan stored all of this information in his mind and waited. On the 3rd day, the buyers came. Most of them were looking for workers, miners, factory laborers. Some wanted servants for their houses. One by one, prisoners were pulled from the cell and taken away. Nobody fought. Fighting meant death. Then a new buyer arrived, and everything changed. He was massive. Nearly 8 feet tall with dark green scales and muscles that looked like they were carved from stone. His species was called Grothian, and even the guards seemed afraid of him. He walked slowly along the energy barrier, studying each prisoner like a farmer examining livestock. His name was Varndok, and Ethan learned later that he was famous. A warlord, a hunter, a killer who had conquered 3-star systems before getting bored with war and turning to sport. Varndok stopped in front of Ethan and tilted his head. "What is this?" he asked the guards. "Human, my lord. From a colony ship we raided last month. Human." Varndok said the word slowly, tasting it. "I have never hunted a human before. What are they rated?" The guard checked his datapad. "Category 7, my lord. Minimal threat. No natural weapons. Average intelligence. They die easily." Varndok smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "I will take 12. Give me variety. I want this hunt to be interesting." He pointed at prisoners one by one. A Krellian with blue fur. A Telvani with cybernetic implants. A Selvari female who could not stop shaking. And Ethan. The guard seemed surprised. "The human, my lord? He will not last an hour." "That is what makes it amusing," Varndok replied. "I want to see how the weak ones run." They were loaded onto a transport ship within the hour. Ethan counted 12 prisoners in total, all chained to the walls of the cargo hold. The Grothian hunters sat at the front, laughing and drinking and placing bets on which slave would die first. The smart money was on Ethan. "The human will be dead before sunset," one hunter said. "Look at him. No muscles, no armor. He's nothing but soft meat." Another hunter disagreed. "I say he lasts until morning. Humans are supposedly good at running away." They all laughed at that. Ethan kept his eyes down and his face blank. He studied the chains around his wrists. Standard magnetic locks. They required a specific key frequency to open. The hunters wore the keys on their belts. The Selvari female was chained next to him. She was young, maybe the equivalent of 18 human years, with pale lavender skin and large dark eyes filled with tears. Her name was Kira. "Are you not afraid?" She whispered. "Yes," Ethan admitted. "Then why do you look so calm?" Ethan considered the question for a long moment. Back on Earth, before the colony ships, before the stars, He had spent 15 years teaching people how to survive in the wilderness. He had been lost in the Rocky Mountains for 9 days when he was 19. He had eaten insects and tree bark and drunk water from a creek that gave him parasites for 3 months afterward. He had watched a grizzly bear kill a man 10 feet away from him. He had learned that fear was useful. Fear kept you alert. Fear kept you alive. But panic was death. "I am calm," he said slowly, "because I have been hunted before. And I am still here." Kira stared at him like he was crazy. The transport ship began its descent. Through a small window, Ethan could see the planet below. Dense jungles, mountains, rivers cutting through valleys like silver snakes. A wilderness planet. A hunting ground. Varndok stood up and addressed his prey. "Welcome to Thornax Prime," he announced. "This is my private world, my game preserve. You will be released into the jungle, and you will be given 1 hour to run. Then my hunters and I will come for you. If you survive for 7 days, you earn your freedom. No one has ever survived." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Run fast, little creatures. Run far. It will not save you, but it will make the hunt more enjoyable." The other prisoners were crying or praying or simply staring into nothing. They had already given up. Ethan looked out the window at the jungle below. He saw dense vegetation, natural cover, water sources, terrain that would slow down anyone unfamiliar with it. He saw opportunity. As the ship touched down and the cargo doors began to open, Ethan allowed himself one small thought. It was not a prayer. It was not a hope. It was a simple statement of fact based on everything he knew about himself and everything he had observed about his captors. They have made a mistake, he thought. They think they bought prey. The chains released, and the prisoners stumbled out into the harsh sunlight of an alien world. Ethan took a deep breath of jungle. Aaron began to plan. They have no idea what they just bought. The first Grothian hunter died on the morning of the second day. His name was Kreth, and he was one of Varndok's most trusted warriors. He had killed over 200 beings in hunts across a dozen worlds. He had never once felt afraid. He felt afraid now. Kreth had separated from the main group to track. What the sensor said was a single humanoid hiding in a ravine. Easy prey. He moved quickly through the jungle, following the signal on his tracking device. The signal led him into a narrow passage between 2 rock walls. He never saw the pit. The ground gave way beneath his feet, and he fell 15 feet onto sharpened wooden stakes. 3 of them went through his body before he even had time to scream. He was still alive when Ethan appeared at the edge of the pit, looking down at him with no expression on his face. "Help," Kreth gasped. "Help me." Ethan said nothing. He just watched until the light faded from the Grothian's eyes. Then he took the dead hunter's plasma rifle, his communicator, and his supply pack. He covered the pit with fresh leaves and moved on to prepare the next trap. The second hunter died 3 hours later. His name was Vorn, and he came looking for Kreth after his communicator went silent. He found the pit easily enough, but he did not see Ethan waiting in the shadows behind him. The bone knife went into his throat before he could make a sound. Ethan dragged the body into the undergrowth and took everything useful. 2 plasma rifles now, 2 communicators, 2 sets of supplies. The odds were getting better. When Varndok's hunting party found both bodies that afternoon, the mood changed. Ethan watched from a hidden position in the canopy as the Grothians examined the scene. He saw their confusion turn to anger and then to something else. Something they were not used to feeling. Fear. What did this? One of the hunters demanded. What creature could kill Kreth and Vorn? Varndok was silent for a long moment. He studied the pit trap, the sharpened stakes, the precise cut on Vorn's throat. Then he looked at his tracking device and found what Ethan had left for him to find. A single word, written in the dirt near the bodies. Human. Impossible, one hunter said. Humans are weak. Category 7. They cannot do this. And yet one did, Varndok replied quietly. There was something new in his voice. Not fear exactly, but caution, respect. The database is wrong. Or perhaps this human is different. He turned to his remaining hunters. No more splitting up. We stay together. We hunt as a pack. And when we find this human, we do not kill him quickly. I want to know how a soft creature learned to fight like this. But Ethan was not done. That night, he returned to his caves to find 3 new survivors waiting with Kira. They had heard rumors spreading through the jungle. Stories about a human who was fighting back. A human who was killing hunters. The first was Rox, a Telvanni engineer with gray skin and cybernetic implants in his arms and head. He had been captured when his repair ship strayed into Victory territory. The second and third were siblings, Dax and Mira, both Krellians with blue fur and sharp teeth. They were young, barely adults, taken from their family's trading ship 6 months ago. Is it true? Dax asked, his voice filled with desperate hope. Did you really kill 2 of them? Yes, Ethan said simply. How? Mira demanded. They have weapons, technology, training. You have nothing. Ethan held up the 2 plasma rifles he had taken. I have these now, and I have something more important. He tapped the side of his head. I have knowledge. I have patience. I have 100,000 years of human survival instinct, telling me exactly how to turn this jungle into a death trap for anyone who enters it. He looked at each of them in turn. You have a choice. You can keep hiding and hope they do not find you. Or you can help me. I cannot promise you will survive. But I can promise that if you fight with me, we will make them pay for every one of us they have ever killed. There was silence in the cave. Then Rox stepped forward. My implants can interface with their technology. If you can get me access to their communication network, I can learn their plans. Dax and Myra looked at each other. Some unspoken communication passed between them. We're tired of being prey, Dax said. We will fight, Myra added. Ethan nodded. Good. Then let us begin. Over the next 2 days, Ethan trained his small group. He taught them how to move silently, how to set traps, how to use the terrain to their advantage. Kira became his scout, using her natural agility to move through the trees and watch the enemy. Rox worked on the captured communicators, slowly cracking their encryption. Dax and Myra learned to build pit traps and DEADFALLS. And Ethan hunted. On the 3rd day, he ambushed another hunter who had wandered too close to their territory. The Grothian was large and strong, but strength meant nothing when you stepped on a hidden spike that went through your foot. While the hunter was screaming in pain, Ethan dropped from a tree and finished him with a stolen plasma rifle. 3 hunters dead now. Varndok had only 4 left, plus himself. The broadcast that Varndok sent to his wealthy viewers across the galaxy had changed. The early episodes showed confident hunters killing helpless prey. Now the cameras captured nervous Grothians jumping at shadows, arguing about whether to continue, refusing to go anywhere alone. The viewers were still watching, but they were not cheering for the hunters anymore. On the 4th morning, Ethan intercepted a message on the captured communicator. Rox had cracked the encryption, and now they could hear everything the Grothians said. We should leave, one hunter was arguing. This is not worth dying for. It is just a human. We do not leave, Varndok replied coldly. I have hunted for 300 years. I have never failed. I will not let some primitive creature ruin my reputation. Your reputation will mean nothing if we are all dead. There was a long pause. Then I will hunt him myself, Varndok said. All of you are cowards. I will show you how a real hunter kills. Ethan listened to the message and smiled grimly. "He's angry," Kira observed. "Angry people make mistakes." "Yes," Ethan agreed. "But angry people are also dangerous. Varndok is not like his hunters. He has survived for 300 years because he is smart and brutal and patient." He stood up and checked his weapons. "This next part will be the hardest. But if we survive it, we win." He looked at his small band of survivors. A Selvari girl, a Telvanni engineer, 2 Krellian siblings, and 1 human who had refused to accept his role as prey. "Get ready," he said. "The real hunt begins now." The jungle belonged to Ethan now. Over the next 2 days, he transformed Thornax Prime from a hunting ground into a killing field. Every path the Grothians might take was studied and prepared. Every water source was noted. Every natural choke point was turned into a death trap waiting to be triggered. The 4th hunter died when he triggered a rock slide that Ethan had carefully prepared on a narrow mountain path. 500 pounds of stone came down on him before he could take a single step backward. The 5th hunter died drinking from a stream that Ethan had poisoned with the sap of a toxic plant. The poison worked slowly, giving the Grothian time to stumble back to his companions before he collapsed. They watched him die over the course of an hour, unable to do anything to save him. Now Varndok had only 2 hunters left, and the hunt had been going for 5 days. The broadcasts were making Ethan famous, though he did not know it yet. Across the galaxy, billions of beings were watching the footage that Varndok's cameras captured. They had tuned in expecting to see helpless slaves being hunted for sport. Instead, they were watching something that had never happened before. They were watching the hunters become prey in military academies and intelligence agencies and scientific research centers. Experts analyzed every frame of footage. They studied how the human moved, how he planned, how he killed. They downloaded everything they could find about the species, called humanity. What they found disturbed them. Humans were persistence hunters. They had evolved to chase prey for hours or days until the animals simply collapsed from exhaustion. They had survived ice ages and plagues and predators that should have wiped them out. They had invented tools and weapons and strategies that let them kill creatures 10 times their size. And they had only been in space for a few decades. They were still learning. The galaxy was beginning to realize that they had badly underestimated this species. But on Thornax Prime, Ethan was focused only on survival. "They have stopped moving," Rox reported, listening to the intercepted communications. Varndok and his last 2 hunters are camped near the landing zone. They are waiting for extraction. "When does the ship arrive?" Ethan asked. "Tomorrow morning. They called for emergency pickup 2 hours ago." Kira looked relieved. "So we won." "They are leaving." "We survived." "No." Ethan shook his head. "If Varndok leaves, he comes back with more hunters, more weapons, an army if he has to. His pride will not let him accept defeat." He checked his plasma rifle. "We have to end this tonight." They moved through the jungle in darkness. 5 survivors against 3 hunters. The odds had improved dramatically from where they started, but this was still the most dangerous part of the plan. Ethan had studied Varndok's camp through Kira's scouting reports. The 3 Grothians had set up a defensive perimeter near the landing zone, with motion sensors and automated turrets covering every approach. They were scared and angry and ready to kill anything that moved, but they had made a mistake. They had set up their defenses to protect against threats coming from outside their perimeter. They had forgotten to check what was already inside. Ethan had been watching that landing zone since the first day. He had hidden supplies there. He had dug tunnels. He had prepared. "Rox," Ethan whispered. "Can you disable their sensors from here?" The Telvanni engineer nodded, his cybernetic implants glowing faintly as he interfaced with the captured communicator. I need 30 seconds. You have 20. Dax, Mira, when the sensors go down, you trigger the diversion. Kira, you stay here and watch our escape route. If anything goes wrong, you run and you do not look back. Kira started to protest, but something in Ethan's eyes stopped her. She nodded silently. Ethan moved forward alone, crawling through a drainage ditch he had discovered on the first day. The ditch ran directly under the Grothian perimeter. Emerging behind a pile of supply crates, just 30 feet from where Varn Doc was sitting, he waited in the darkness, counting his breaths. The sensors went down. A moment later, a massive explosion lit up the jungle on the far side of the camp. Dax and Mira had triggered the fuel cells that Ethan had buried there days ago, creating a fireball that rose 100 feet into the air. The two remaining hunters spun toward the explosion, weapons raised. Varn Doc shouted orders, sending them to investigate. Ethan moved. He came out of the drainage ditch like a shadow, silent and fast. The first hunter never saw him. The bone knife went into the base of his skull, and he dropped without a sound. The second hunter heard something and turned. Ethan shot him twice with the plasma rifle before he could raise his weapon. Then, it was just Ethan and Varn Dock. The Grothian warlord was old, but far from weak. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, with scales as thick as armor and muscles that could crush stone. He had been killing for 3 centuries. He had never lost a hunt. "Human," Varn Dock said, turning slowly to face Ethan. "I underestimated you." "Everyone does," Ethan replied. "You have killed my hunters, destroyed my reputation, made me look like a fool in front of the entire galaxy." Varn Dock drew a long curved blade from his belt. "For that, I will make your death last for days." He charged. Ethan had expected rage, and rage was what he got. Varn Dock was fast despite his size, closing the distance in seconds. But rage made people predictable. Rage made people sloppy. Ethan sidestepped the first swing and ducked under the second. He fired his plasma rifle, but Varn Dock's scales deflected the shot. He rolled away from a kick that would have shattered his ribs if it connected. The fight was brutal and short. Varn Dock was stronger, faster, better armed. But Ethan had not survived this long by fighting fair. He threw a handful of dirt into Varn Dock's eyes. While the Grothian was blinded, Ethan dropped to the ground and swept his legs. The warlord stumbled. Ethan grabbed a fallen branch and drove it into the gap between Varn Dock's scales, right where the armor was weakest. The Grothian screamed and swung wildly, catching Ethan across the face and sending him flying. Ethan hit the ground hard. Blood filled his mouth. His vision blurred, but he got up. He always got up. "You should have read our history files," Ethan said, spitting blood. "Humans do not give up. We do not surrender. We keep fighting until we win or until we die." He picked up Varn Dock's dropped blade. "And I am not ready to die yet." Varn Dock tried to rise, but the wound in his side was bleeding badly. His movements were slow, clumsy. 300 years of hunting, and he had never learned what it felt like to be the one bleeding out on the ground. "What are you?" he gasped. Ethan stood over him, the blade raised. "I am human," he said simply, "and we have never been prey." The blade fell. When it was over, Ethan stood alone in the ruined camp, surrounded by the bodies of his enemies. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds. His ribs were cracked. He could barely stand, but he was alive, and they were not. The extraction ship arrived at dawn. It descended through the clouds, expecting to find Varn Dock and his hunters waiting with their trophies. Instead, the pilot found a lone figure standing in the middle of the landing zone. Covered in blood and surrounded by bodies. Ethan raised a plasma rifle and pointed it at the cockpit. "Land," he said through the communicator he had taken from Varn Dock. "Land now, or I shoot you out of the sky." The ship landed, The pilot was a nervous veteran, one of the same species that had captured Ethan in the first place. He came down the ramp with his hands raised, his multiple eyes wide with terror. "Please," he begged. "I am just a pilot. I do not hunt. I only fly the ship." "Then you will fly it one more time," Ethan said. "You will take me and the other survivors off this planet. You will drop us at the nearest neutral station, and then you will forget you ever saw us." The pilot nodded frantically. Ethan called for the others on the communicator. Within an hour, all the survivors had gathered at the landing zone. Kira, Rox, Dax, and Mira, and 4 more who had emerged from hiding. Once they realized the hunters were dead, 8 survivors in total. 8 people who should have died on this world, but had not. They boarded the ship in silence. Most of them could not stop staring at Varn Doc's body, which Ethan had left in the center of the camp for the cameras to record. The Grothian warlord, who had hunted thousands of beings across hundreds of worlds, killed by a creature his own database had classified as minimal threat. As the ship lifted off, Rox accessed the onboard systems and found something interesting. "The broadcasts," he said. "They were still running. The entire galaxy watched what happened here." Ethan looked out the window at the planet falling away below them. "Good," he said quietly. "Let them watch. Let them learn." The footage spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, it had been viewed billions of times. Military strategists analyzed every moment. Politicians debated its implications. Scientists rewrote their assessments of human capabilities. The Category 7 classification was quietly removed from official databases. No one wanted to be responsible for calling humans minimal threat anymore. On Earth and in human colonies across settled space, the video became a source of pride. This was what humanity was capable of. This was what happened when you underestimated them. But the most significant changes happened in the places that had once seen humans as easy targets. Slaver captains who had previously raided human colonies began to think twice. The profit margins were not worth the risk anymore. Not when there was a chance that one of their captives might be like the human from Thornax Prime. Underground markets that had traded in human slaves saw their prices collapse. No one wanted to buy a creature that might kill them in their sleep. And in the dark corners of the galaxy, where powerful beings gathered to discuss the future, a new word entered the vocabulary. Persistence. Humans, they learned, were persistence hunters. They did not give up. They did not stop. They would chase you across deserts and mountains and oceans until you collapsed. They would track you for days or weeks or years. They would never forget and never forgive. This was not a species to be hunted. This was a species to be avoided. Ethan knew none of this as the ship carried him away from Thornax Prime. He sat in the corner of the cargo hold, letting a medical drone treat his wounds while Kira sat beside him. "Where will you go?" she asked. "After this?" Ethan thought about it. He had been a survival instructor once. He had been a colonist. He had been a slave. Now he was something else. Something the galaxy had never seen before. "I do not know," he admitted. "But there are others like me out there. Humans who were captured. Humans who are still being held. Maybe I can help them." Kira was silent for a moment. "What you did back there," she said slowly. "The way you fought. The way you planned. I have never seen anything like it." "Humans have been doing this for a long time," Ethan said. "We just never had to do it in space before." The ship dropped them at a neutral trading station 2 days later. The pilot fled as soon as his passengers were off, eager to put as much distance as possible between himself and the human who had killed. Varn Dokk. Ethan helped each of the survivors contact their families or find transport home. Rox returned to Telvanni space, where his engineering skills would be welcomed. Dax and Mira went back to their parents' trading ship, forever changed by what they had experienced. The others scattered to their own worlds, carrying stories that would be told for generations. Kira was the last to leave. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. You saved my life. You saved all of our lives. You saved yourselves," Ethan corrected. "I just showed you how." She hugged him, a gesture that surprised them both. Then she walked onto a transport headed for Selvari space, and Ethan was alone. He stood on the observation deck of the station, watching ships come and go. Somewhere out there, slavers were still operating. Hunters were still hunting. Beings were still being treated as prey. But things were changing. He could feel it. His communicator beeped. A message had arrived, routed through a dozen anonymous relays to hide its origin. Ethan opened it and read the contents. It was a list of names. Humans who had been captured in the past year, along with their last known locations. Someone had compiled the information and sent it to him without any explanation. At the bottom of the message was a single line. "The galaxy needs to learn. Will you teach them?" Ethan read the message twice. Then he deleted it and walked toward the docking bay where his newly acquired ship waited. Von-Dock's ship, actually. Spoils of war. He had a lot of work to do. 6 months later, a Vexari slaver captain named Tarek received a strange message after raiding a distant human colony. His crew had captured 15 humans. All valuable cargo for the underground markets. The message contained only coordinates and 4 words. "Ethan, Cole sends regards." Tarek stared at the screen for a long moment. He thought about the footage he had seen from Thornax Prime. He thought about the stories that had spread through the underworld. He thought about what happened to people who made enemies of persistence hunters. "Release them," he ordered. His crew looked at him like he was insane. "Captain, those humans are worth a fortune. We cannot just let them go. Watch me." Torek's hands were shaking. "Release them. Give them supplies. Give them a ship if we have one to spare. And then we leave this sector and we never come back." The humans were released within the hour, confused but unharmed. The slavers vanished into deep space, and that particular crew never raided another human colony again. Across the galaxy, in bars and trading posts and military briefings, the story was told again and again. It grew with each telling, becoming legend, becoming myth. The lone human who had been sold as prey. The survivor who had turned the tables. The hunter who had emerged from the darkness to become the most feared predator the galaxy had ever underestimated. And somewhere in the endless void between stars, Ethan Cole flew onward, following the next set of coordinates, hunting the hunters, teaching the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Humans were not prey. They had never been prey, and anyone who thought otherwise would learn that lesson the hard way.